Maybe we should just wait till Trump isn't president anymore. We want to be where God wants us. Dusty village in the middle of Afghanistan. Jesus wasn't a real person. The Jews kind of blew him off. You're right, the Bible is not a book. We don't have any copies of the original text. Obviously, Islam and Christianity can't both be true. Both of them are false.
Islam is an expansionary, an aggressive religion.
Life is about me, make it me great again. I have friends who are gay. Pedophilia.
What's your opinion on abortions?
But we don't do that.
What's your view on LGBTQ?
Gay people should be denied housing, not people. There's some really important questions.
I think the Orthodox Jews are not, they don't work.
I was born with a desire to find young women attractive. Therefore, I should fulfill that desire and have sex with every young woman I possibly can, because it's just the way God made me. You can't blame me.
Oh, wow. Professor Clark, hello.
Hello.
Nice seeing you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Can you briefly introduce yourself to the people who may not know you?
Okay, my name is Bill Clark, Professor Clark. I've been at AUBG since 2007, and I teach biology and environmental science. And occasionally, when the philosophy department needs someone, I teach a course on science and religion.
Interesting. So first of all, almost 20 years in AUBG.
Yeah.
How's that working for you?
Great. We actually began connecting with students here back in about 1997, but I've been on faculty since 2007.
You said we.
My wife and I. Yeah.
Is your wife also teaching here?
She used to be the coordinator for the Writing Center. She did that for about 12 years, but she's not doing that now.
You said environmental science and occasionally some philosophy courses related to religion.
Right. Science and religion.
Yeah. So one of the, how we met, first of all. I saw you first in the debates.
Yeah. Well,
I think even before that, though, right?
Well, I know Greg.
Yeah.
And Greg said that he was going to be on this, and I knew nothing about it, so I watched his debate and said, "Oh, that's really interesting." That I think it's really cool that you have these podcasts going. And then I watched your interview with Diego, Dr. Lucci, and that was interesting. I thought, wow,
that was one of the best ones, in my opinion. Regarding the debate, did you like it? Well, what are your thoughts on Greg's points?
I thought the debate was okay. Afterwards, my office is kind of across from Dr. Lucci's office, and we were talking. He says, "Well, we can't expect much more from undergraduates." He said, "I thought the arguments could have been a little more sophisticated, but then we're talking undergraduates, not philosophy majors, not debating champs." But I thought each side was respectful. I think if anything, Alexandra was maybe too respectful, and I said, "Come on, say what you mean. Don't apologize. Say what you mean."
First of all, thank you for coming and attending and giving the feedback. And you also won sushi, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I've already,
you used it already?
Used it already. Yeah, so I'm all set. Yeah.
Great. How was Sakura? Good?
It's okay. Yeah, I'm not a big sushi fan, but it was nice. Yeah.
Amazing. I want to start first of all with AUBG.
Okay.
Are there things, and there are definitely some, can you name some of the things that you may not appreciate as much and you would wish some areas that AUBG would improve in? After spending so many years here.
I have this passion for environmental science, sustainability, caring for the creation. AUBG over the years has talked about being sustainable, being environmentally friendly. And I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for this, but I have a feeling the university is more concerned about appearing sustainable and environmentally friendly than actually having a commitment to it. You can tell what an institution's committed to by where they put their money, and there's no real sustainability initiatives.
I see. I think it's not only with sustainability though, like the Ministry of Propaganda, the marketing team of AUBG wants to appear as it we're like heaven on earth almost, which is basically their work.
That's their job.
Yeah. So the sustainability is may improve in some points, especially the commitment, the actual commitment of the university, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have this building was built 2005 or so. they could have made this building with more insulation, more environmentally friendly, but that costs more. So, and I understand it's a nonprofit institution, a private institution. They have to balance their budgets.
Break even.
And you can't, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. But there's more they could do in their design of buildings, the way they run their programs, that would be more sustainable.
All right, you mentioned religion. And like I know, and say if I'm wrong here, I've heard some stories that you and your wife, sometimes you meet the students from AUBG, and not only, at your place.
Yeah.
On Fridays, right?
It's Fridays now. It used to be Sundays. Yeah.
Tell me more about it. Why, how it started?
Well, no, I mentioned that we had our first contact with AUBG students about 1997. So, if I start going too long, just interrupt me.
Sure.
But we first came to Bulgaria, my wife and I and our two sons. We moved to Bulgaria in 1992. And
why? Excuse me.
I was working with a Christian mission agency, and we did a number of different things. We had some. We worked with orphanages, and we helped with some adoption, foreigners who wanted to adopt children from Bulgarian orphanages. We were helping pensioners pay their heating bills. We were just trying a bunch of different things, because we were just trying to get used to living in the country, learning the language and all. And one day in our apartment in Sofia, we lived on the 6th floor of a building with no elevator. So it took an effort for people to get there. Somebody knocks on our door, and I have no idea how they found out about us, because we were very low key. And he said, "Oh, I hear you're some kind of Christian missionary or something. There's a group of students at AUBG who are meeting together to read the Bible. Would you come down and join us?"
Wow.
And we're thinking, wow, that'd be cool. And this is back in, before the highway was in. So it was always a big adventure to travel from Sofia to Bulgaria back then. Potholes and narrow roads and, dark. And so we came down twice a month, and we just fell in love with the place. It was before this building was here. I think there was just one of the Scaptos. The students were living in different places around town. We thought, wow, this is such a cool place, and we really liked working with the students. One of the attractions was everything was in English, because we had Romanian students and Bulgarians, a Nigerian, and
Was the diversity back then and the percentage of international students more?
It was considerably more.
Oh yeah.
And so we were thinking, how can we become a part of this? And I thought, well, the best way would be to be an insider, to become a professor. So in the year 2000, we were going back to the States for a little while anyhow, because our kids were finishing high school and they're going to be starting university. So we thought we should go back and help them through that transition. So we went back. I got a master's degree, then I got a PhD, came back here, and I taught 2 years at UZU. We moved to Blagoevgrad in 2005. Taught for 2 years at UZU, and then in 2007 I started teaching here.
How was in UZU?
I tell my students, I'd be very happy you're at AUBG. UZU has some wonderful professors. They have some good students, but the system's really broken.
I see. What drew you to religion? Were you part of a religious family, or you came on your own?
Yeah. I grew up in a kind of like at that. Oh no, there was another debate I was thinking. But I grew up in a Christian family. Growing up, religion or Christianity was one of the things that was important to me. But also being outdoors and sports, and it was one of the things that I was interested in.
That was in the States, right?
That was when I was younger, growing up in the U.S. Yeah.
So where in the U.S. exactly?
I grew up in upstate New York, and I always want to make it clear, not New York City. We were at the far end of the state from New York City. I grew up near the Canadian border, kind of near Niagara Falls.
Yeah, one of my friends here, you probably know him, Sebastian. He's a sophomore as well.
I might know him.
Yeah, he's from upstate New York, and he's always the guy who says, not New York, the upstate New York,
That's
right?
That's right. It's a different world.
Right. Do you miss U.S. sometimes when you're here after so many years?
Actually, it's just the opposite. So my wife is thinking it might be time to go back to the U.S. And I'm thinking, oh, I like Bulgaria so much. I like the way of life here. You know, we've been living here for most of the past 30 years. I mean, we have friends in the States. My kids are in the States. So, yeah, we miss some things. But for the most part, life in Bulgaria is wonderful, very comfortable.
What is about the current political and social landscape in the U.S.?
That's one thing that could keep us out of the U.S. for, you know, my wife and I have a joke, maybe we should just wait till Trump isn't president anymore. And I know I'm out of sync. I mean, half of the United States voted for him. I have no idea why. I feel like he's a complete disaster.
I see. What do you like about Bulgaria the most? What keeps you, like, this is the turning point for me, for example?
You know, so for a lot of the things in my life, it's not so much the where, you know, because our focus in life is, you know, we want to be where God wants us. We want to be helpful for the people around us. We want to bring, you know, the blessings that we've received from God to others. I'm happy that's in Bulgaria. I'm glad that I didn't feel like I was called to some, you know, dusty village in the middle of Afghanistan somewhere. This is much more comfortable. But the thing I really like about Bulgaria is the pace of life is slower. No, it's a modern European country. Everything you could want is here. But people have time. And this is changing some, but you know, you can go to a cafe with someone, sit down, talk for an hour. The waitress isn't going to try to move you on. They don't care. You can sit there all day if you want. And people have time to sit and talk, and the pace of life is slower. It's in the United States, people are just so busy and so consumed by their jobs and trying to make money. It's kind of nice here. Po spokojno.
Yeah. Work to live, not live to work.
Yeah.
You said that you sometimes describe yourself as a follower of Jesus Christ, but when I hear that, I instantly picture in my mind Mormons, the Church of Jesus Christ. Is it connected, or you're different?
No. And again, knowing that there's probably some Mormons listening to this, historically, you know, if you go back, say like 40, 50 years, Mormons would differentiate themselves from Christians. They'll say, you know, we're Mormons, we're not Christians. I remember traveling through Utah when I was in my early 20s. I stopped in at the Mormon temple, went to their, you know, visitor center, and it was very clear that they were differentiating themselves from historical Christianity. I went back again, you know, 30, 40 years after that, and you really couldn't tell the difference. Now, theologically, there's huge differences, and it comes down to, you know, who is Jesus? The historical Christian view is that Jesus is the incarnate Son of God. Orthodox Christians, Catholic Christians, Protestant Christians, that would be the point of agreement. Mormons would have a different view of who Jesus is. They'd say he is a God, but not the Son of God. Mormonism isn't a Trinitarian religion. They don't believe in the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So there's divergences with historical Christianity. So, I mean, I have a lot of respect for my Mormon friends. They tend to be very moral, very conscientious people, but they have a completely different view of those foundational Christian doctrines.
In simple terms, can you say what do you believe in with regards to religion? What's your view?
So, you know, I'm a theist. I believe there's God, so I'm not a materialist. I think there's more than just matter and energy. And then historically, I would be a Christian theist. You know, looking at the story arc of the Old Testament, you know, God created the earth, created man. Man became separated from God due to their bad decisions, disobedience, sin, whatever you want to call it. That all happens in the first 3 chapters. You know, you start out with paradise, you have the fall, you know, man falls into sin, and then the rest, you know, that much is about, you know, paradise and the fall, and the rest of the book is about God's story of how he's bringing mankind back, how he's rebuilding his kingdom, how he's reestablishing that original order that he intended. So Christianity is about God restoring our relationship between man and God, between people themselves, between man and nature. It's God restoring the kingdom that he wanted to establish.
I asked this question in debate, and I want to ask you now, do you think religion is a psychological need, or...
It meets psychological needs, but people can live without religion. I remember you asking that question. I thought that was interesting. Maybe you can clarify. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by psychological need?
I mean by that some people, let's say, they may find a meaning in religion in order to cope with the harsh reality that we have. And just because of this, not because that they, not necessarily because they genuinely believe in the Bible, in Jesus Christ, and whatever they want to believe, but rather in like a coping mechanism in order to deal with reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be used that way. That's not going to get you very far, because if it's just something, I think a lot of people have this idea with religion. You kind of look at what's out there. You know, you got Hinduism and Buddhism and Shintoism and New Age beliefs and occult beliefs and Christianity, and you kind of find one that kind of fits you. You find a philosophy of life that works for you. A lot of people approach it that way, but
it's not the right approach, in your opinion.
I don't think so. I think it needs to be based on, well, what's real? You know, because if your beliefs don't match reality, they might have a pragmatic value, but in the long run, they're not going to be that helpful if they don't match the way things really are. So Christianity is a historically based religion, especially when it comes to who Jesus is. You know, was Jesus a real person? Did he live in Palestine in the first century? You know, did he teach certain things? Was he, prosecuted under Pilate?
And this is historically accurate.
Yeah, well, that's the question, is it? But we can use historical means, you know, just like if we want to know, is Caesar Augustus, was he a real historical character? How did historians determine this? They have certain tools. You know, they look at manuscripts, they look at different records, and we can do the same with Jesus. So if Jesus wasn't a real person, if he didn't really die and rise again, it's a nice story and it might help you have good morals, but if it doesn't match with reality, I think it loses a lot of its value.
And in your opinion, it does match with reality?
Yeah, I think that it stands up very well to historical tests that Jesus really existed, that he was crucified, that he rose on the third day, and you know, we have this continuation of his mission through the disciples he made.
One of the things that atheists and non-believers, let's say, in Christianity say, how about the fact that the Bible was written through a long period of time and was probably rewritten regarding the translation? So the technical part of this, how do you?
Yeah, there's. I mean, I'm not an expert in textual criticism, but that's actually, I think, a strength, is that we have this. You're right. The Bible is not a book. The Bible is a library of books written over 1,400 years by 40 authors in 3 different languages. And yet it has a story arc that goes all through it. It's self-consistent. It can, you know, there's verifiable events, you know, historical events. I've kind of lost my train of thought. Can you ask the question again?
Regarding the fact that there's a huge history to Bible written in a long time, and probably...
Yeah, so one of the arguments is that, well, you know, it's copies of copies of copies, changes. And through the science of textual criticism, you know, we have these fragments. We have pieces, there's no original text. We don't have any copies of the original text. So the Apostle Paul wrote a number of letters. We don't have any of those original letters. So when you're looking at ancient documents, you want to know, when was it first written? How long of a period was there before we had the first verifiable copies? And how many different copies do we have? And how can we compare those copies with each other? yes, there's been changes because, back then they didn't have Xerox machines. It was all copied by hand. So there's thousands of manuscripts. We can compare them to one another and say, oh, this one used this word, this one used this word. But we can see that they both came from this copy that, and this copyist maybe made an error here and here. There weren't any, there's no fundamental doctrines that are affected by those types of changes. So you'll hear these statistics, there's, and I don't know, I'll make up a number. There's 20,000 variations. It's sometimes how a name was spelled. Sometimes it was plural instead of singular. It's very small things. A letter was transliterated,
Sure.
but no major doctrines are affected by these. And because we have so many different manuscripts that come pretty close, I mean, so Paul wrote in, I think, about the 40s to 60s AD. We have manuscripts from the 2nd century of his letters. So there's only a pretty short gap. Now, we don't have his whole letters, but we have some ancient manuscripts that come real close to the time. We have much better verification on the life of Jesus than we do almost any other ancient figure. Now, nobody questions whether Julius Caesar was a real person,
Sure.
but they question Jesus. But we have far more evidence that Jesus really existed. Now, so I think it's pretty clear that the manuscript we have now, when you pick up a Bible, of course, there's Bulgarian Bibles, English Bibles, but what you're reading, you can be pretty sure is close to what was actually written. Different translations are going to, but we all go back to a certain agreed upon Greek text that they were taken from. But then there's another question: is what was written actually true? I mean, that's the second. But as far as the reliability of the manuscripts themselves, that's pretty well established. Then you have to say, well, okay, let's take it as a given that this manuscript I have now in the 21st century is an accurate reflection of what was actually written 2,000 years ago. Is it true? That's a separate thing. And then, did Jesus really turn water into wine?
It's a separate thing.
That's a separate issue.
Yeah. What do you think about the, let's say, non-official, non-canonic books, such as the Book of Enoch and others?
Yes, it's interesting to mention the Book of Enoch, because I just started looking at that recently. I mean, I'd heard of it before. There are reasons those books are non-canonical. So, a lot of people had this idea that Constantine determined what books were in the Bible. Yes, there were church councils, but they weren't so much determining which books were in the Bible. It was like which books are actually being used and were part of the life of the early church. In other words, the books that are included in the modern Bible, in our in the canon, those were agreed upon. Yeah, those were the books they used. So they say, what books do you use down there in Alexandria? What books are being used in
Jerusalem? It was not arbitrary, but based on...
Yeah, it was based on which ones they found actually useful. And they were much closer to those original authors to know, this is a fake. A lot of those, the Book of Enoch was written, Enoch is a Bible character from way, way back. But the Book of Enoch was written in that period between the Old Testament and New Testament, about 300 or 400 BC or something. Interesting material, but it's actually included in the Ethiopian Bible.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
In that Bible, but the Orthodox Bible, Catholic Bible, Protestants don't include it. And even in the Ethiopian Bible, I don't think it's given the same precedence as other books. But really interesting stuff can be found in some of those apocryphal books.
Exactly. I have two reasons for asking this specific question. One of them is, as mentioned before, there's a rise in this Orthodox and not only in religion in general among the young people, I would say, especially for specific political ideation, let's say. And another reason is that one of my closest friends when I was in Alaska, he was a follower of, you know, calling not Jesus Christ, but Yahuwah, Yahusha.
Was he from a Jewish background? Or?
He was not actually. He was Puerto Rican, no Hebrew, no background like this. And he, like, let's say, recommended me to read a book of Enoch as being the sacred book containing all the wisdom in the world, all the mechanisms that underlie our world, right? What do you think of different denominations within the Christianity? Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox. They have in some ways, they have pretty distinct views on Christianity, on Jesus Christ, etc. First of all, what's your view? And second of all, what do you think of different variations of that?
Yeah, I would say that a committed Orthodox believer, Eastern Orthodox believer...
What is the closest?
Well, Catholics and Orthodox are pretty close, but also when it comes to those core beliefs, have you heard of the Nicene Creed? The Nicene Creed is kind of the foundation of Orthodoxy.
I know what the creed is, but not this one.
I forget what year it's from, 400 or something, but Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox would all agree, yes, that is what we believe. And so at the very core of Christianity, of course, is Jesus, hopefully. No, that's why we call it Christianity. That Jesus is God's Son, that he became a man, lived among us, so that God, so that we could know God. What a better way to know God than having Him become one of us, walk among us, lived a perfect life, died for us, and through that death was able to bring us back to God. That's at the center of, if you ask the Orthodox priest, the Catholic priest, or most Protestants, they say, yeah, that's what we believe. Now, there's lots of, as you get further from that core, there's more differences. And one thing I've really enjoyed about being at AUBG and being involved with students over 20 years or more, we've had people from all different backgrounds, but when we focus on Jesus and who He is, a lot of those other things just aren't that important. Of course, we had a 30-year war in Europe over some of those differences, so somebody thinks they're important.
At some point, yeah. I have a question regarding the values different denominations of Christianity bring. For example, I believe it was Max Weber, and correct me if I'm wrong, that developed this notion that, for example, Protestant countries that have a Protestant idea, they do much well according regards to wealth, etc. Because of the work ethic and you have to. It's your responsibility to fulfill your full potential in order to in front of God, right? Yeah. So what do you think? We see on the map that most of the Western countries are Protestant, and on average they're doing pretty well. Yeah. And let's say better than Catholics, which in turn are doing economically better nowadays than Orthodox. Do you find a correlation here, or it's just?
Well, I've often heard about the so-called Protestant work ethic. And I'm just thinking out loud here. I think there are things within Protestant Christianity about taking personal responsibility and all those things, but part of it might also be which countries became Protestants and Catholics. So a lot of the Catholic countries in Europe are in the south, and there's just it's hotter. You take a siesta during the middle of the day. It's just a different. The Mediterranean, Southern European lifestyle is different than someone in Norway or Finland. They happen to become Lutherans, Protestants. So, again, not being a historian and anthropologist, I wonder, is it just because of the religion, or were there other factors that contributed to that? Historically, I mean, you can follow. At one time there's one church. If we go right after the time of Jesus, the church was not institutionalized. They met in homes. They were under persecution. And it was during that first 300, 400 years that the church spread to the whole Roman Empire. Eventually it became institutionalized, became recognized as the church. So you had the Catholic Church. The Orthodox would disagree. They say, well, no, you had the Orthodox Church. And then 1200 something, the Orthodox and the Catholic split, but a lot of that had to do with the Roman Empire splitting. So it was
the politics, basically.
it was political and religious and cultural. You had different cultures, and then the Protestants split off from the Catholics, but they all came from the same root, and at the heart they had the same focus on Jesus.
What do you think of Islam?
Islam is really an amazing phenomenon in some ways. You think of this guy, Muhammad, and when did he live? Around the year 600, something like that?
7th century.
Yeah. In such a short time, Islam conquered much of North Africa and the Mediterranean world. It spread in a much different way. So Christianity, in its infancy, spread slow. They were a persecuted minority that spread through relationships, through they were caring for the poor, and they were even the pagans recognized that these Christians have something going for them. They take care of one another. They take care of us when we're sick, and so it slowly spread as a movement inside, this bigger cultural system. Islam kind of became a force from the outside. Now I'm probably oversimplifying this, and Muslim scholars would disagree, but Islam spread as an outside force coming in. So they came and conquered. There were Islamic armies that conquered, and so they had a much different means of spreading. They didn't so much mix with the culture as conquered the culture.
Sure, but that's from rather historical perspective.
Right.
What about the religious perspective?
Again, it goes back to what is true. Obviously, Islam and Christianity can't both be true. Islam says Jesus was a man. Christianity says no, he was God. Christianity says Jesus died on the cross. Islam teaches no, he didn't die on the cross. Somebody came and substituted for him. And so one of them or both of them are false. They can't both be true because they make different
opposing
different
statements.
Truth statements.
Yeah.
My thinking is what happened. So Muhammad lived in this polytheistic culture. He abhorred the polytheism, and he had contact with both Jews and Christians. But from what I understand, they didn't treat him real well. They didn't. He was out there a Bedouin out in the desert. The Jews kind of blew him off. The Christians blew him off. But here's this man who committed to monotheism. So, and what would have happened if the Christians had treated him better? He said, no, Muhammad, let us spend some time together. Let us explain to you what we believe and why we believe who Jesus is. Because Islam has a very high regard for Jesus. And they have a high regard for the New Testament. And in fact, if you ask an Islamic person, what part of the New Testament don't you agree with? And they'll say, well, all of it, we agree with all of it except the parts that disagree with the Quran. So,
what do you think of a trendy notion, and not necessarily trendy, that Islam is an expansionary, an aggressive religion within the Quran, within the religion itself?
Yeah, again, I've read the Quran, I haven't studied it, but there are enough passages within the Quran that are on the lips of at least Islamic extremists. And you can't judge a religion by its extremists.
Sure.
But
what that was, I'm sorry, one of the arguments of Greg, right, on the debate that extremists in Christian religion and extremists in Islam religion are two different things. That was, he said, one of the reasons why he chose Christianity, I think.
Yeah, it's like, I guess if you're a Christian extremist, you should be extraordinarily loving, forgiving, patient, kind.
Yeah, that was his quote, yeah.
Yeah, and this, I think historically, although I know there's lots of pushback on this, I think historically you can see that Islam largely spread by an army, by the power of the sword. And you still see that there's this harsh view of God, that God is the judge, and you step out of line and
strict parent.
Yeah, whereas Christianity shares that view of God, that yes, God is holy and righteous, but in becoming a man, we can approach him now through Jesus, much more approachable. So there's you don't usually hear of Christian extremists cutting people's heads off, flying planes into buildings, and again, you can't condemn all of Islam because of the actions of a few extremists, but there's something different at their core in terms of attributes like love, mercy, peace, patience.
Let's go to the third biggest Abrahamic religion, Judaism. 2 questions here. Is Judaism a closer understanding of the Bible, of the Old Testament, naturally? And is the current state of Israel and current Israeli people and Jewish people, which are 2 separate things, I do understand, is the closest we have to the actual followers of the Old Testament, of the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in that question. The modern state of Israel is very different than the ancient Israel of the Bible. In Israel now, you have a small percentage who are Orthodox Jews. From what I understand, most Israelis are secular or semi.
I think the Orthodox Jews are not they don't work. I think they are paid by the taxpayers or.
Well, they might work, and again, I don't know the details, but an Orthodox Jew who's very serious, for example, on the Sabbath, they won't turn on a light because it says in the Old Testament, you shouldn't start a fire on the Sabbath. That's work. You're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, and turning on the light is like, well, that's kind of like lighting a fire. So, I had a friend who had a Jewish roommate at university, and the Jewish roommate would ask the other one, "Can you turn on the light for me? I want to study now, because I'm not allowed to do it on the Sabbath." So it was okay to study, but he couldn't turn on the light.
Sure.
I think a serious Jew who takes the Old Testament scripture seriously would be, in a lot of ways, analogous to an Old Testament Jew. Wanting to follow the law, seeking to please God through obeying that law.
I have another more utilitarian question, more pragmatic one. Let's say we take the values of Christianity, the core values of altruism and so on, help the others. And we take those values and having this value calculus, right? We say that these values are, let's say, beneficial for the society. And we introduce these values in the society. Even if people don't actually believe in God, they're not religious per se, they're pretty much secularized, are those values, you think, beneficial for the society in general?
Yeah, I mean, if you
live by them, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah,
but
if you live by them.
But why do you think so?
Just so at the core of Christianity, Jesus was asked, what's the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said, the main commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And then he said, and the second is like it, that you love your neighbor as yourself. And so there's this idea that I should care for my neighbor, I should care for the poor, care for the immigrant. Just imagine what the world would be like if each of us was really looking out for the welfare of the people around them. That it wouldn't just be about me, but if I saw that my neighbor was having problems, I'd share my food with him. Or if they had a car accident, I'd say, well, why don't you use my car to get to work until you get yours repaired? It'd be a wonderful world, right? I mean, whether or not people actually believed it, if we could actually love our neighbor as ourselves, it would kind of be like heaven.
This episode is brought up to you by the help of our friends from Sakura, the best sushi in town. Well, I have a counter argument to that. The principle of altruism in itself has an aspect of sacrifice, right?
It can, yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because it costs you something to,
Yes, and sacrifice by itself means giving up a higher value for a lower value. It's not the benefit itself, because even if a deed is beneficial by itself, it is not considered altruistic if there's not enough sacrifice in it. But for example, let's say...
I mean, does it have to hurt before it counts? Like
Exactly. I do think that is the notion that is put in the word altruism, which, like in a more political sense, like it basically translates to otherism.
Okay.
It was a French term coined by the same guy who coined sociology.
Okay.
And it was basically the idea of inventing a religion on its own, but instead of after the death of God by Nietzsche. But instead of God, there's a society as a higher value. Is society a higher value in Christianity?
Higher value
than God.
Well, no, I think the highest values, we want to please God. We please Him by living according to the standards He's given us, loving our neighbor. But you're right. There's within the biblical culture, as we look at the societies of the Old Testament, first century Palestine, where Christianity grew up, it was a much more communal society. That the community meant something. Whereas in the West, and I think this is part of what we see happening, a distortion of Christianity in the West is that we've taken our individualism, which isn't really a biblical value, and we've imposed it on there that life is about me, make it me great again, make America. So it's this very selfish, inward-looking thing. Me and my group, my family are the most important. And you might extend it out a little bit, whereas and Bulgaria is more of a communal society than the United States. The United States is off the scale when it comes to individualism. And I think that can distort some of these values. But altruism, it can be something as simple as, and I've just noticed this, and I'm walking down the sidewalk, and it's kind of normal. You walk on the right, the other people, you pass each other. But have you ever had a situation where someone's just walking right towards you? I mean, they see you there, but who has to step aside? If I don't step aside, they're going to run me over, and it's no big deal. They want to get somewhere in a hurry. I'm happy to step aside. I think a lot of the altruism that we talk about is just being aware that I'm not the only one on this planet. That I share this planet, I share this university with other people, and I need to step outside myself enough to realize there's other people around me with their needs and their concerns. It doesn't mean I give up my needs and my concerns, but I become aware of the fact that I'm not the only one with needs and concerns.
And you consider selfishness not a good thing, basically?
Usually it's a bad thing, yeah. I mean, I think God has, built into our DNA, we have to have a certain amount of selfishness or else, we wouldn't survive. We have to eat, we have to,
But aren't Christians also act according to selfishness? For example, the afterlife. So you suffer now in order to gain a benefit after your death.
So is it a bargain, do you think? Like, God, I'll make a deal with you. I will give up this, this, and this now so that you'll give me this thing later.
Well, it may look like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people do approach it that way. It's kind of
utilitarian, once again, yeah.
Like, okay, God, if I do enough good things, then you owe me something. And that's very human. But I don't think that's at the core of what Christianity teaches about grace, that there's nothing I can do that's going to make God love me more. I mean, grace is a gift that He gives me. I cannot earn a place in His kingdom. That's a gift that He gives to me. Now, as a result of my gratitude and as I understand who He is, I want to live that way. First of all, because it's what pleases Him. And secondly, I start finding out, like, wow, life is better when I live this way.
So there's a...
And of course, I mean... I would hope that, part of what motivates me is that I know that there's something better coming, but it's not because I've earned it. It's because of His love that He says, this is the kingdom that I want you to be a part of. But He's given us free will. I can choose to
So there is free will.
I think so. I mean, just from a practical point of view, I read this book recently, determined by neurobiologists or whatever, and try to say,
It's all about chemicals in our
and your upbringing, your chemicals, your society, where you were born, and those things all have influence. I mean, there's no denying that we have lots of influences on us. But at the end of the day, don't you make decisions every day?
I feel that.
At least it looks like we have free will. I mean, I decided to be here now. I could have gone home and,
What's your opinion on abortions?
They happen.
That's a fact. What's your opinion about abortions?
I would say that I'm pro-life, but again, because of free will, I think it's something worth advocating for. I don't think it's at the heart of the Christian faith. I don't think, and I think this is a mistake that American Christians have made, that they're willing to ignore all sorts of other values. If they'll choose a politician that might just be a horrendous person, but if they're anti-abortion, like, he's our man. So I think life is something really special. I have questions about when does life begin. Some people say,
which is why I said the core, basically, of the abortion debate.
It could be conception. I know it's not 3 minutes before a baby's born.
Sure. So something in between, right?
Yeah. So this is some place where science can help us. Science can tell us, when can a child live outside the womb? When does it first have brain waves? When does it first have a heartbeat? Those don't answer the question, but they help inform the question. So my personal opinion is abortion is wrong. But on the other hand, we have to have compassion on, you think of this young teenage girl, she got pregnant in a terrible way. The father of that child wants nothing to do with her. Having this baby is going to be a tremendous burden on her. If we really believe that abortion is wrong as a Christian community, we should come out alongside that young woman and say, look, life is so precious. Regardless of how it was conceived, it's precious. We are going to be with you every step of the way. We will pay your doctor bills. We are going to help you through the process of getting this baby adopted. If you choose to keep the baby, we will support you in that.
I see.
But we don't do that. I mean, there are cases where there's Christian groups that actually do that. But in most cases, it's just shouting at them, oh, you're a sinner, you're having an abortion, without any compassion for the fact that, look what this woman's gone through. And there is something about, the other side of the argument is a woman has a right to her body. Fully agree. But what's not brought up then is, well, what about this other individual? Does that, is it just a mass of cells, or is that an individual that also has rights? And I don't think we can completely negate the fact that there's this life or potential life, potential person, or maybe even already a person, to say that I have a right to my body, yes, but we also have to somehow bring this developing person into the picture. There's no simple answers. It's complex.
What's your view on LGBTQ?
Again, I believe it exists. I have friends who are gay. I don't think it's the lifestyle that will bring about the greatest human flourishing. But
so you think it's a choice? It's not something somebody's born with?
I've never been gay, so I can't speak experientially. But most of the gay people I talk to would say that they were born that way, and it probably certainly feels they were. But whether they were actually born that way or it was from such early childhood, you might not be able to have any control or minimal control, maybe even none, over your sexual orientation. And the biology of it is really interesting. There's a genetic component, there's a hormonal component. Were you the first son in that womb, or are you the third son? And so there's lots of reasons that might contribute to gender identity. But we do have choices about how we act. And this analogy, I know isn't going to go real far, but I'm heterosexual. I teach at this university. There's lots of really beautiful young students here. God created me with this desire, and I was born with the desire to find young women attractive. Therefore, I should fulfill that desire and have sex with every young woman I possibly can, because it's just the way God made me. You can't blame me. It's not, I was born this way to love young women. Well, of course not. I have to control my sexual impulses. My wife's happy that I do. We've been married for almost 48 years.
Oh, wow.
And neither of us has ever been close to having an affair. But those are choices we both made, that even though I'm attracted to women, and biologically, evolutionarily, the more genes I can get out there in the next generation, the better, I can still say no. And I know that there are gay people who have, because of their belief in God, because of how they read the New Testament, they have chosen not to act on their same-sex desires. They either choose to be celibate, which, that's a hard choice, right?
Yeah, it is.
Or, they will be in a marriage, and their spouse knows that they're gay. They can still have sex, they can still create children, but they have made a choice, because as people, we actually can make choices that have consequence. So just because someone has a certain, otherwise, pedophilia, we could say the same thing. There's some people,
where do we draw the line, basically?
Yeah, and where do we draw the line? And when do we hold a person responsible? And on the other hand, if there's two gay people that are living together, having sex, that's their business. It's not my business as a Christian to say, no.
It's a sin.
It's a sin. It might,
But is it a sin?
Well, I might say that this, I can identify, the Bible would say this is sinful behavior maybe, but there's lots of things that, greed is a sin, alcohol abuse is a sin. We have to be really careful about being judgmental. Now, that doesn't mean we never speak against things, but they have made a choice.
Yeah.
Even if I disagree with their choice, they still are worthy of respect. I don't think gay people should be denied housing, denied insurance. They should have
discriminated against.
They should have all the civil rights that anyone else has, even if I think their lifestyle is wrong.
Out of all 7 deadly sins, what's yours?
So what are the 7 deadly sins? I think all sin is deadly, because if you allow any sin to persist and it separates you from God, that's a problem. So I know there's gluttony. Do you know this? That's kind of a Catholic thing. I don't know this.
Envy, wrath.
That's bad.
Gluttony.
Yeah, that's not good either.
Anger.
Ooh, yeah.
What's yours?
And again, there's no place in the Bible that lists 7 deadly sins. That's kind of a human invention. All sins are deadly, but I struggle with just wanting the focus to be on me. I want attention. I crave, approval.
Like ego.
Ego, yeah, being the center. Having the world revolve around me. Gluttony, not too much of a problem with. Anger at times, but I'm pretty chill. If I get angry, I usually go someplace else and scream, not at people. I have been known to kind of beat a computer, but not people. Envy, that kind of goes with that wanting, seeing somebody else get an award that you think you should have. How do I feel? I should have gotten that. So, I struggle with all sorts of things.
What is a piece of advice you would give to young people in general and to AUBG students specifically? Yeah,
so there's some really important questions. I teach science. I love science. Science answers lots of great questions, but there's some questions that science isn't going to answer, history's not going to answer.
Such as?
I like, in my science class, I often talk about, science will tell us how things work and the intricacies, but it can't tell us what's right and wrong. It can't tell us what's beautiful and what's not beautiful.
There's no morality in the fact.
There's no a strict materialist that's honest. And I've heard, like Richard Dawkins has even said things like this. There is no absolute rights and wrongs if there's no God. Of course, societies have to operate so we create rules for ourselves, but they're not absolutes. So I would encourage, what I encourage my students to do is know what you believe. A lot of students, if you ask them, well, what do you believe about God, about the universe?
Know your philosophy.
So know what you believe. Know why do you believe it? So when I'm in conversations, people tell me what they believe. I say, wow, that's really interesting. How did you come to that conclusion?
Like epistemology of yours.
So you're like a philosophy guy, so you use all these fancy words. Epistemology, so what you believe, why you believe it, and then what are the 3 best arguments against what you believe? There's always since not everyone believes it, there must be arguments against it. So what are the 3 best arguments? And then what are the best counter arguments to those arguments? And, you can't work through this with everything, but the important questions you should be able to work through. What do I believe about God? Does God exist? Somebody said, yes, I believe in God, or no, I don't. Well, why? What are the 3 best arguments, in my case, what are the 3 best arguments against the existence of God? And what are the counter arguments to those? So, at university, you have that time to think, and hopefully, you have that time to think, to contemplate, to start forming, who you're going to be, shaping your worldview. Now is the time to figure out, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? What are the arguments against it? And what are those counter arguments?
Last minute question. What's your opinion on Jordan Peterson?
I haven't listened a lot to him. He's really interesting. He's like a psychologist,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he has lots of interesting things to say, and he's circling around Christianity. He's not quite willing to land, but he holds these Christian values. And, people a lot of Christians love him because he says conservative things that they agree with. Yeah. But people ask him, are you a believer? And he doesn't really want to land there. So I find it very interesting to listen to, but a lot of his opinions are more political than philosophical.
I see.
Yeah.
I think the way he usually answers the question whether he believes in God or not is that firstly define belief.
Yeah.
Because to believe is to die for it, to live by it, basically.
Yeah.
Professor Quark, thank you for this conversation.
Well, thank you.
It was a pleasure for me.
I hope we can meet again off camera sometime.
Absolutely. I will be glad to do that.
Right. Thank you.